Frank Partnoy, the match king. Ivar Kreuger, the financial genius behind a century of Wall Street scandals. Delve into the exhilarating world of Ivar Kreuger, the financial genius who conquered Wall Street with his charm, wit, and cunning business acumen, in The Match King, written by Frank Partnoy. Famously successful in dominating Sweden's matchstick industry, Kreuger's goal was to raise funds in the US and gain control of international safety match monopolies. Witness the rise and fall of his tangled webs of businesses, secret companies, and financial manipulations as he takes his empire to tremendous heights and tragic lows in the roaring 1920s. This summary will guide you through the extraordinary story of a man who played a crucial role in forming the foundation of Wall Street regulations, and whose legacy still resonates with the financial world today.
Ivar Kreuger, the Match King. In the 1920s, Ivar Kreuger, a successful Swedish businessman, traveled to the US to raise money for his holding company, Kreuger & Toll. By showcasing his charm and business skills to wealthy investors, Kreuger managed to pay 25% dividends and become the leading producer of safety matches worldwide. His new plan was to lend money to governments in exchange for exclusive rights to sell matches in their countries. Despite his success, Kreuger's business was built on fraud, and he eventually committed suicide in the wake of financial collapse and scandal. The rise and fall of Ivar Kreuger. Ivar Kreuger, a Swedish entrepreneur, sought to create a worldwide match monopoly. His success at securing financing from Lee Higginson and Company, one of New York's foremost investment banks, paved the way for his new venture. With charm and confidence, Kreuger won over the bankers, who believed he could lead them to surpass J.P. Morgan and Company. Kreuger and Donald Durant, head of the syndicate department, set out to raise capital and established the International Match Corporation. They issued convertible gold debentures, allowing investors the option to redeem their bonds for cash or gold. Kreuger sent his brother to Latin America and Europe to propose the monopolies to governments. Nonetheless, Kreuger faced a significant challenge, getting his funds out of America. He established the Continental Investment Corporation, a secret conduit company in Switzerland that enabled him to move funds from the US to Europe while evading taxes. However, Kreuger's monopolies eventually failed, driving him to take out loans and issue fraudulent bonds. These actions led to his downfall and eventual suicide. Nonetheless, his legacy persists. Kreuger believed in the power of confidence, which propelled his rise and fall, from a small businessman to a leading industrialist and ultimately to a convicted fraudster. Kreuger's elaborate financial scheme. In the book Empire of Pain, Patrick Radden Keefe sheds light on the elaborate financial scheme created by Ivar Kreuger. Kreuger used complex bookkeeping methods and an intricate network of subsidiaries, affiliates, and shell companies to hide his debts from U.S. auditors who were investigating his stateside businesses. His legitimate companies couldn't generate enough profit to pay dividends promised to his investors, so he resorted to creating a Ponzi scheme, using new investor funds to pay current backers. Despite owning real successful businesses, Kreuger's empire was built on a foundation of deceit. His estimated net worth was at least 25 million kronor, and he was considered one of Europe's richest people. Ernst & Ernst, Kreuger's hand-picked American auditing firm, was instrumental in perpetuating his fraud by agreeing to his inventive bookkeeping methods. Kreuger went to great lengths to ensure that A.D. Burning, a junior Ernst & Ernst auditor, would acquiesce to his fraudulent activities by sponsoring extravagant trips for the young man and his wife. By 1924, International Match, Kreuger's company, was showing signs of financial trouble, with only 2 financial documents and income for 1921 and 1922, despite being established in 1923. However, Lee Hig, the company's partners, continued to trust Kreuger's vision and profited immensely from his schemes. The Deceit of Ivar Kreuger. Ivar Kreuger, a Swedish financier, built an empire in the match industry by using complex and questionable business practices. He was able to secure a monopoly deal with Poland's government in exchange for a hefty loan. Kreuger invented B shares to raise money without giving up power to investors. He sold high-dividend preferred shares to honor his agreement with Poland and hired an unscrupulous auditor to hide his illicit activities in Garanta, a company he set up in Amsterdam. Kreuger's money movements were untraceable, and by 1926, International Match was one of the most widely held stocks in the U.S. In 1927, he arranged a loan for France using a complicated derivative, becoming the Superman of finance. He lived a luxury life and hobnobbed with famous people until the stock market crashed in September 1929. Kreuger's Overconfidence. In this book, the author details Ivar Kreuger's financial exploits which ultimately led to his downfall. In one scenario, Kreuger promised to lend Germany $125 million, which would have to come from American investors, despite the recent market drop. To boost confidence in the issue, Kreuger promised to buy back any unsold securities in 1 year at cost. Kreuger's ego prevented him from backing out of his agreement with the German government despite the market crash. The timing of this deal coincided with the most spectacular 2-day decline in the history of financial markets. Kreuger did not panic and even increased the International Match dividend. However, his bankers and competitors became more suspicious. According to Kreuger's reported earnings, his profit margins were an astounding 20% on matches, which didn't make sense. Kreuger's overconfidence in his ability to manipulate the market ultimately led to his downfall. The betrayal of Ivar Kreuger. The rise and fall of the Match King, Ivar Kreuger, who went from a visionary entrepreneur to a villainous schemer that ended up committing the largest financial fraud in history, costing thousands of investors their fortunes. Ivar Kreuger was once known as the Match King, a visionary entrepreneur who became one of the wealthiest men in the world, but his success was short-lived. His story exemplifies the proverbial saying that, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Kreuger rose to fame in the early 1900s by consolidating the fragmented match industry into a global monopoly. He was an ingenious marketer who sold matches as a must-have accessory for the sophisticated elite. His empire spanned across 42 countries, and his estimated net worth was around $10 billion in today's dollars. However, Kreuger's path to success was not without its ethical dilemmas. He cut deals with corrupt politicians and turned a blind eye to labor abuses in his factories. His downfall began with his attempt to prop up his company's stock by printing phony Italian government bonds worth $100 million. The forgery started to unravel when some banks took Kreuger up on his offer to buy back almost $4.4 million in unsold American certificates. In 1931, the value of his company's securities precipitously dropped, and bankers and analysts speculated that he had serious financial troubles. The usually abstemious Kreuger began drinking and smoking heavily. He disappeared for months at a time, shunning all human contact. At the end of the year, Kreuger returned to the U.S., where he met with President Hoover and delivered upbeat speeches across the country. However, his schemes were catching up with him. To boost his company's share price artificially, Kreuger used a middleman to buy his own stock, but the ruse did not work. An auditor's team from Price Waterhouse investigated one of Kreuger's firms, Ericsson, and discovered that he owed IT&T some $11 million on an Ericsson deal. The Swedish authorities used search warrants to collect Kreuger's business documents and made inquiries into the phony Italian bills. Kreuger's physical and mental state deteriorated, and he became increasingly paranoid. Two of Kreuger's associates searched the Match Palace for collateral and discovered the forged Italian bills, supposedly worth $100 million. Meanwhile, demands for cash were growing, and investors were starting to panic. In February 1932, Kreuger physically collapsed and began alternating between mania and depression. On March 11, 1932, Kreuger bought a 9mm pistol in Paris. The next day, when he didn't turn up for a meeting, his associates discovered his body in his apartment. It appeared he had shot himself through the heart. When investors learned of Kreuger's death, they panicked, and the New York Stock Exchange recorded the largest single trade in the history of the markets, a sale of 673,800 American certificates of Kreuger and Toll. Their value at day's end? Pennies. Kreuger's rise and fall is a cautionary tale of ambition and greed. He went from a visionary entrepreneur to a villainous schemer that ended up committing the largest financial fraud in history, costing thousands of investors their fortunes. The list of his 15,000-plus creditors ran for 200 pages and included such mainstays as Harvard College and the Chase Securities Corporation. Few of the people Ivar touched had happy endings, leaving Kreuger as the Judas of the financial markets. The rise and fall of Ivar Kreuger. A financier once revered by the investing public for his legitimate business ventures became known as the greatest swindler in all history due to his financial manipulations. The scandal surrounding Ivar Kreuger's fraudulent activities led to a call for securities reform, resulting in the establishment of the SEC and generally accepted accounting principles. Though Kreuger's reputation was destroyed, his legitimate businesses, including the founding of Swedish Match, still exist today, and he influenced the creation of complex financial products on Wall Street.
The story of Ivar Kreuger transports us through thrilling business ventures and illuminates the consequences of greed, ambition, and an insatiable appetite for wealth. With his unparalleled ability to charm investors and weave impenetrable webs of deceit, Kreuger became one of the most revered and reviled figures in the world of finance. His tragic, scandal-ridden downfall shaped the landscape of modern financial regulations and standards, leaving a long-lasting impact on Wall Street. In reflecting on the complex life of the Match King, we recognize the duality of hero and villain that can coexist within us and the high-stake games that can lure us away from honesty and integrity.